Hey guys, we're here to talk about something a little bit different, and that is the Killers of the Flower Moon ending. One of the main things that Alonzo and I talked about when we had the pleasure of going to see a screening of Killers of the Flower Moon together was the ending, because I didn't know how I felt about it at first. In the actual watching of the thing, I didn't know how I felt about it. And then I want to talk about it.
Let's warn everyone that because we're talking about the ending, these
Oh,
are
yeah.
all spoilers. So
These are spoilers, yeah, and it says so in the title.
Yes, just come back later. We don't yell at us because we're telling you up front. These are spoilers.
I mean, there are some people who want spoilers beforehand.
Sure.
I've heard a lot from all of our viewers saying, like, please do more spoiler talks. I'm okay with spoilers. I want to know. I would not want to know. Some of you guys want to know. So we're talking about the very, very ending. And this is where it becomes this radio show.
Yes.
And you have the likes of Jack White on stage as their performers, and they are essentially doing for us what title cards might have done in a drier way, like so and so went on to do such and such. But here they do it with theatricality, with performances, with
Foley.
Sound effects. Yeah, totally. And then Scorsese himself comes out and adds a very solemn tone to what had been kind of a big, shiny theatrical spectacle. And he says what happens to Molly at the end. And there's a deviation between what he is telling us and what was actually reported, right? He's telling us what actually happened. And at first I was like, oh, that's a really bold choice. Stylistically and tonally, it's such a departure. I mean, just visually, it's a huge departure because it's so bright, right?
Yeah.
Everything else prior to that is so muted and so richly dark at times that this is a big, big difference. And then the overhead shot of the drum circle, and it is like, pulling out, and you see how brightly colored that is. And you realize this is the first time we've really seen bright color in this film. And that's, I think, intentionally a differentiation there. But I came to really appreciate that choice after I thought about it for a little while. What do you think of the ending?
I loved it, and like I couldn't immediately articulate what it was about it that I thought was so effective. But yeah, the more that I kick it around, I think what the radio show part is doing, it's basically, for me at least, and I could be totally wrong about this, but my interpretation is that Scorsese is reminding us that this is a true life horror that we have watched an artistic interpretation of. And we have watched an artistic interpretation that has been created principally by white men. Like, he directed this film. He and Eric Roth co-wrote this film. And so even though this is a story about a tragedy that occurred among the Osage, it is also a story about crimes committed against them by white people. And so I think by removing us from what we have come to understand as the world of these people and giving it this additional level of kind of distance and artificiality, he's reminding us that really all of this has been reportage, has been a version of this story that isn't being told by the people that it necessarily happened to, and is an artistic vision of a tragedy rather than a tragedy itself. And it's kind of allows us to leave knowing, to realize that we haven't experienced this ourselves, that we haven't witnessed this firsthand. We have witnessed a recreation of these events, a true crime retelling, a reenactment in a way. And I think the radio show kind of cops to that and reminds us of the layers through which we're seeing this event. And then that final drum circle is this and these are the people to whom it happened, and they remain indefatigable. They exist, they thrive, they survive, they live on, even despite the attempts to wipe them out by a handful of people who had, greed and other things on their minds. So both of those things, I think, come together in a really powerful way, and I thought they were really effective.
Yeah, the thing with the drum circles, because, you realize that the infinite nature of this history, of this culture, where you think it's starting out small and it just keeps going and going as the zoom happens or whatever it is, out of as a drone that
drone goes higher,
goes up, right? And it just gets wider and wider and more colorful and more people of every age. And there's such an affirming quality to that, as you say, like, we are still here. We are not going anywhere. I think the theatricality of that is intentional in the radio show. Yeah, as a reminder of like, this has not been told to you completely truthfully, or if at all. You know,
Sure.
we talk about the fact that we didn't learn about this or the Tulsa race massacres in school. Like, Watchmen was very helpful in enlightening us about the Tulsa race massacre. So just a reminder of how throughout history we have told these stories or not told these stories, you know?
Yeah. And
So,
who makes those decisions and who makes those differentiations, and you know, the media that is run by white people, you know, much like that, you know, and radio networks were kind of an early example of mass media in this country. You know, you had like newspaper chains, but then radio was really the first time that, you know, people coast to coast were hearing the same programs and hearing the same news programs and that kind of thing. And then television obviously took that further.
yeah. And just like why, and the fact that it's like, it's entertaining, right? Like what we're hearing is awful, but there's like an upbeat kind of like zippy quality to it,
Right.
almost to make us feel like it's going to be okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, when we're watching the radio people make the footstep sounds or the car noises or whatever, and it's like, that is a version of, we have just watched actors acting these roles and, you know, like costume designers and people creating this world for us out of, out of nothing, basically building these sets and, you know, putting all these extras here and all of the stuff that's happening. That's what a filmmaker does, is they take this genuine, you know, true life horror, but then they have to like, they create it, they turn it into art, they build it from scratch. And so, you know, in the world of the radio, it's like, we're giving you the sound effects, we have actors portraying these different characters, and so these are all kind of levels of removal from this actual horrible thing that happened. And when we talk about the zone of influence, we can get into that as well. But you know, yeah, I think that Scorsese is kind of like tipping a hat to what all movies do, essentially. I mean, all narrative movies certainly that are about real life events, but even specifically just about this one and how it came together, and what we should leave thinking about. You know, do we leave thinking about the fictional representations and the artists that made that happen, or do we think about the real people who suffered through this, and the fact that as a people, you know, they are there in front of us, they exist in our world, they are, you know, they are there to tell their own stories.
Right. And this is someone's version of it, and even though it's a well-intended version, it's only one side of the story, one version of the story. So
exactly.
Well, let us know what you guys thought about the ending. Let us know if they're sticking intermissions in the middle of your showings of it. I'm so fascinated by this story and appalled by it. So let us know what your thoughts are, all of that. And thanks so much for being here.